Good deal. Okay, we are recording. Awesome. Sound is on, and our first interview is off to the races. Today I have Sam with me. Hi, Sam. And I'll let you introduce yourself in just a second. But we were just behind the scenes talking about what's the premise and why we're having this conversation. So the subject we're discussing today is addiction and success. And Sam, before we started, was asking me, what's the angle? Why are we talking about this? I find that women, when we talk about success and achieving, there are so many angles to look at it, but something, at least in my experience, that doesn't get a lot of light is the true challenge of dealing with addiction, working through addiction, having family members who have been affected, because it's hard to find that true joy and happiness and your definition of success when that's something that's, a part of your life.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being on today, Sam. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
So Sam and I met a couple of years ago. Has it been a couple of years now?
Yeah, about 2.5.
Okay. When you attended one of my live events, and I just remember you sitting in the front row with your little containers, and I recognize the containers from the My Fitness Journey, and I've been a part of fitness community and doing the nutritional program and fitness programs, and we connected, and I've been following you ever since, and it's been a true pleasure to watch you grow and blossom into the woman and a mentor and a leader that you are today.
Well, it's been fun to watch you as well, and I will never forget the glittery shoes that you wore on stage that day. They were so cute.
Still have those. Still have my little Michael Kors collection. I actually bought them. It was a symbol. It was a pretty symbolic moment. I bought them for me when I decided to quit the multi-level marketing that you and I both have in common, and start my own gig, my own business. And that was kind of my first photo shoot. I bought those, and I still keep them kind of like that sparkling inspiration of something new.
Absolutely.
Well, Sam, tell me a little bit about your story, so our listeners, our people who are watching this, can get a glimpse of who you are, what do you currently do, and what's your mission?
Sure. So my name is Sam. I'm originally from Anchorage, Alaska. I was born and raised there. I moved to the Traverse City area when I was like 23 or 24 years old. I met a boy in Alaska, and he's originally from Traverse City, and he wanted to come back and go to school to be a police officer here. So I followed him all the way. And we have an 11-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter. And I have been working in insurance for about 20 years now. I worked at an organization in town for about 14 of those years, wearing a number of different hats. And it's been a great career journey for me. I love insurance, and I know that sounds really nerdy, but I do. I love reading policy language. And my favorite thing about insurance and working in the industry is really leading a team of people to help them achieve their goals. I'm really passionate about helping people and developing them on a career path, because I think people are so much more capable sometimes of what they give themselves credit for. So I worked there for about 14 years. Most recently, I am a VP of operations for an agency, a different agency. We've got 9 locations throughout Michigan. And then about 6-7 months ago, I decided to really take a step back from that. There is, as Jenya mentioned, the fitness and nutrition program that she and I are both familiar with. A friend of mine introduced me to it in 2018 after I had lost my dad suddenly, and I was a little bit shell-shocked and kind of in a little depression. And she said, "You need to snap out of it. Come do this thing with me." And I'm like, "I don't want to do this thing with you." She goes, "Just try it." So after 30 days, I was absolutely hooked, and continued the program. But it had really been on my heart for 2 years to pursue it as a career. And so about 6 months ago, I ended up resigning from my role. However, we were able to work out something where I'm able to act as a strategic and HR consultant for the agency part-time, so I can do it from home and also pursue this passion that I have.
That's
And a
awesome.
lot of it too had to do with, we all of us moms, we see our kids growing so fast. And I don't know about any other moms out there, but I get really anxious when I think about the day that they graduate from high school and they leave the house. And I felt like a hamster on a wheel, and like time's just flying by, and I just needed to get off the wheel. And I
Yeah.
just want to be home more. I want to attend everyone their games, their practices, drive them to school, pick them up, and just slow the F down. So
Amen.
that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, that is so awesome. Before we even get in the subject that we're talking about today, this just gave me goosebumps. And I think in general, the moment when you find it, and I'm so proud of you for just stepping out and going for what you want. We get comfortable having good jobs. We get comfortable building our careers. I still work a job too, and I went from part-time back to full-time, and I'm doing the business thing. But it's like you get to have both. You get to have whatever you want, and you get to change your mind if you want to step back, if you want to go forward. But once you figure out what that is that you want, or at least give yourself permission to start looking for it, it's a beautiful journey.
You know what's funny about that, Jenya, is when you say you get to have both. So at this other place that I was at for 14 years, it was really, really scary to leave. And I was terrified of it because you've been there for so long and they're a great employer in town and people love them.
Hmm.
And there's this fear of like, well, what would you do without that? And you take the leap and you're scared, but it all works out.
Yeah.
And then when I decided to take this other leap and resign from this nice job, I love the people I work with. I make a nice salary, great benefits, and I resign. And you say you get to do both. Yeah, like I am so grateful and blessed and in awe of how it all worked out. Everything works out no matter what, no matter how hard or shitty you think it is at the time, it all works out. I mean, even I look on it now and I'm like, how lucky am I to be able to do both?
That
You
is,
can do both.
yeah. And not to sidetrack, but I know a lot of women who are listening to this, they're either entrepreneurial spirits, business owners, wannabes, working through, starting their own gig, or maybe working on MLM, multi-level marketing, right? To have that passion and some freedom of it. And I think in that world in general, we often hear it's like, you can just give it all up and, jump in and build this business. But here's this thing, it doesn't always work out like that, and you also don't have to risk it all. And not just say you need to have a plan B, right? If in case this doesn't work out, you get to recoil. But it's like it doesn't have to be so black and white. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Just trust your gut and go with
Yep.
that.
Trust your gut. Amen.
That's awesome.
That's the truth.
Awesome. Well, great intro. So good to hear from you on that. And I know a lot of women can relate here. Well, today, excuse me, I wanted to bring a subject up, and I'm so thankful for you, for one, being so open about your personal journey of addiction and recovery. And I'll tell you a little bit of why it perked my interest. A couple years ago, when I was mentored by Gabby Bernstein, we all know her, spiritual teacher, known person in the world of entrepreneurship and spiritual things. She speaks about the fact that when she started, she was at the, rock bottom of her addiction story. And her success, she built on that. And up to that point, it was never really a part of conversation for me. It wasn't really anything that I was strongly aware of, just because I was lucky enough, I guess, not to have people in my immediate circle struggle or go through things like that. However, working on myself, right? Personal journey, a beautiful part of entrepreneurship. It's like the ultimate personal development test.
Yeah.
You start to uncover things that about yourself that start to make you wonder. And one of the things I remember hearing from trauma therapist, she said, not all, how was it? Not all traumatized people are addicted, but all addicted people have been traumatized. And it just opened my eyes to the fact of And I was exploring the subject of trauma and how that, it doesn't necessarily mean, physical or sexual abuse. Sometimes it's just accumulation of life events that caused us to carry that hurt and that trauma. And sometimes we find the outlet through substance abuse or, addictive behaviors of that sort. And that's made me wonder, it's like, how many of us have that inclining or have that escape? And when escape becomes an addiction, and how that all, circle back to living an everyday life and working through things that happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my angle, and that's what got my interest in it. So, and of course, I'd love to hear your story a little bit. And I know it's a sensitive and a personal story, so I appreciate the boundaries, but so thankful for you be willing to share it with us.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about your journey and how do you come to the point of now being in recovery and being open and talking about that and living your life, to the fullest.
Sure. So if you would have asked me to do this 15 years ago, there's no way in hell because as most alcoholics and addicts know, you're just full of shame and you don't want anybody to know. And it's interesting when you bring up the trauma part of it, because I've never looked at my life events as being traumatic. But now that I look back at it as a sober person, and I have looked back at, things as a sober person, I think it is more of that accumulation of things that probably led to a lot of that. And I can just kind of take you through my story. And I'm an open book, I'll talk about anything. But just to kind of start, back when I maybe first noticed that I had an issue with addiction, I was probably about 14 years old, and probably even younger than that, actually. There's things that we did back then that I would be mortified if my kids did today, or I don't think kids have any inkling of some of the stuff that we used to do back in the day before we knew better about a lot of things. I'm not saying I'm naive and there's not a lot of stuff out there right now going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember the first time I got drunk, I just had this euphoric feeling, and I was probably 13 or 14 years old. I was at a neighbor's house, and we were just having fun with his parents out of town. And I noticed, throughout high school, I've always been an athlete. I was in every sport you can imagine, good grades. And by the time I got into probably 10th, 11th grade, I saw that really starting to slip because I was more interested in partying and
Mm-hmm.
drinking. And it wasn't just drinking at the time. It was alcohol, it was cocaine, it was everything you can imagine. It was acid, it was everything. So by the time I was 17, this is where it gets a little personal. I was already kind of in that partying mode, letting things slip. And then, so my mom and dad got divorced when I was about 6 years old. And we ended up living with my dad, my brother and I had a brother who was 3 years older than me. And my mom lived on her own, but obviously, they'd co-parent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were always close. But when I was 17, she remarried a gentleman named Jeff Davis, and I absolutely loved him. My mom it's funny because my dad was like a sports sit on the couch guy with a remote in hand. And my dad was an alcoholic as well. He grew up, the whole time I grew up, he drank. But he was like the best dad in the world. He was never mean. He was just a drunk. But he was at every one of my games. He'd always shoot hoops with me. He'd always play catch with me on the street. He was just a really great guy. And then when I was probably 19, he got sober. And I think his work kind of threatened him that if he didn't get sober. So, and he never drank again after that. But growing up, I had seen him drunk many times, and my teammates would know, because I remember one of my teammates coming to me one time and saying, "I think it's really cool that your dad's at every single one of our games, even though he's drunk." And I'm just like, "Oh my God, people know," So, we were close to my mom, close to my dad. And then when I was 17, my mom met Jeff. So anyway, he was like the sports on the couch guy drinking a beer. And my mom was like this tall, beautiful, loved to travel the world, liked the finer things. So she met Jeff, and he owned a large architecture and construction firm in Anchorage. And he was this guy from Australia, and he was just adorable. And they dated for a while, and then they got married in October of '87. And then 5 months later, they were traveling on his plane he was opening another office in Seattle in addition to the one he had in Anchorage. So he had a private plane, and they were on their way back from Seattle. And I was supposed to go to dinner with her that night and go out to a movie. And their plane crashed, and he died instantly. They crashed in southeastern Alaska, and he died instantly. And I just remember, okay, here's what I was doing after school that day. Me and my friend Shauna, we went to the liquor store, and she had a fake ID. So we got a couple of bottles of liquor, and we were at her house playing quarters. And I looked at the clock, and I'm like, I got to go. My mom's picking me up. We're going to dinner tonight. And I get home, and the look on my dad's face, I'll never forget it. I walked up the stairs, and he was hanging up the phone, and he said, Jeff is dead, and your mom's being flown to Seattle. So they got her out of the water, but she had been underwater for like 30 minutes. So like the next few days are just a blur. My brother and I got on a plane the next day, flew to Seattle, saw her in the hospital, talked to her, but there was nothing there.
Mhm.
So when I look back, like I've never like felt that I've been a victim or that I've been traumatized. But when I look back at things, yeah, that's, I guess, traumatizing and could probably make somebody's addiction worsen.
Yeah, I would say so.
So, so after that, I graduated high school a couple months later, and my boyfriend at the time, we decided that we would, he dealt drugs. So after dealing cocaine for a while and living with him, we decided that we would buy a van and drive to Mexico just to get away from it all.
Hey.
So yeah, so 17 still, bought a van with the money I got from my mom's life insurance policy, which wasn't a lot, by the way. And we drove to Mexico, and we took 2 months, and we just partied, and we had a wild time. And when we got back to Anchorage, I walked up my dad's stairs, and he looked like he had seen a ghost. Like, how thoughtless of, a 17-year-old girl to just be like, I'm going to Mexico. I'll see you when I see you. So
Friend's dream, I'm sure.
yeah. And so it just kind of keeps going from there. I mean, I can tell you from then all the way up to now, if you'd like. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into.
Well, tell me, how long into that lifestyle and how long into that life of partying and drugs and alcohol were you till you realized that it wasn't just something you did for fun, that was an issue?
I was about 30. And it's funny because so he and I broke up. I met my now husband when I was 23. And we ended up moving to Michigan. And it's always been a problem. I used to hide like little airline bottles in my car. And I thought I was really good at hiding things, but alcoholics think that they're much better at hiding things than they actually are.
Mhm.
So I met my then husband. We moved to Michigan, and I've always been like a high functioning alcoholic. I've always gotten really lucky with good jobs. So we moved here. I worked for the Convention and Visitors Bureau for a couple of years. And it was the first job I got here was at the Park Place. And then I worked for the Convention and Visitors Bureau for a couple of years. Loved that job. Was still able to drink, but function and be a really good employee. And then I did advertising sales for a couple of years. And that was a really fun job. And the crew that I worked with, we were really close, but we loved to party, and we'd travel a little bit. Like we'd go up to the Sioux for a week, and we'd go to different territories at a time, depending on the calendar. And that's when I really started to notice things were getting out of hand. Like we were up in the Sioux one time, and I wrecked my car hitting a light pole. I did things with that group and I would black out and not remember things. I made really, really bad judgments. And it was starting to take a toll. And it was at that point, after doing that for a couple of years, and then I got a DUI. And I got a DUI. I tried to run from the cops. I had, those those big telephone poles, and they've got those guide wires that kind of hold them in place.
Mhm.
Ran my car up on one of those guide wires. My husband's a police officer, okay? So not really a good look for him. So when that happened, I checked into rehab, and I was in rehab at Munson for about 30 days. And the day I got out, I went and got a pint of Bacardi and drank it. And I can't tell you why. I just guess I wasn't ready at the time.
Mhm.
And so I started going to AA meetings, and I met a lot of amazing people that I still have great friendships to this day through AA. But every AA meeting I'd go to, I'd have a pint of booze sitting under my driver's seat, and I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there. And I would just drink it on the way home. Um, and so I ended up leaving my advertising job. And then I thought, well, let me see what's going on with insurance. Why don't I go learn about insurance? Because I was trying to think of something that people will always need, and
Mhm.
people are always going to need insurance. So I wanted to learn about that. So I got a job for a state farm agent, got licensed, did okay in the beginning, but the alcoholism was really starting to take over at that point. And I was about 30 years old.
Mhm.
Like, I was not a good employee. I was very low functioning at that point. I would call in sick, but I didn't remember calling in sick. So I would call in again. And that's mortifying. Like, you don't even remember if you called in sick to work or not.
Wow.
And that happened on several occasions. And then finally, a friend of mine had an opening at this other company in town. And she said, "Hey, I know you're interested in claims. So we have this opening."
Mhm.
And I think that job, a lot of that job's probably saved me. Um, and I really can't attribute it to like rehab or anything, getting sober. When I was 35 years old, it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And my husband and we went to his best friend's wedding, and I got shit faced. And I was supposed to be sober at the time, and I had booze hidden up in our hotel room, and I don't remember half the wedding. He left me there that night and went home, and he was so disgusted, and he was about ready to go.
Mhm.
And I don't blame him. And so at that point, I just kind of hit my knees. And I was never born, or I was never brought up religiously. I'm not an atheist. There's nothing wrong with being an atheist. There's nothing wrong with being religious. But I was just never brought up in a church.
Mhm.
But I hit my knees on September 1st, 2005. And I just said, "Please, please, please." And I'll start crying because I remember I was just desperate, because I either wanted that, or I literally wanted to get my own little dingy apartment and drink until I died. That's what I really wanted to do. And it was just like this one night when I was staying in another bedroom in our house because we weren't sleeping together anymore. And I just got on my knees and I prayed. And I have been sober since that night. I can't fathom or understand why or how. It's a God thing. Whether you believe in God or not, it's a spiritual thing, because getting sober is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
That's wild. So when you made the decision, when you made the decision, tell me about your life after, because I can't imagine that being easy.
It's not easy. um, no, and for anybody that's gotten sober, they know it's not easy. And like in the beginning, you just have to like put one foot in front of the other, and like literally just take 1 minute at a time sometimes, because a lot of it has to do with that broken trust, and that like the trail of destruction that I left, especially in my relationships. And I used to always, like, I had this vision in my mind. Alcoholism, to me, it was like I was in this room with this giant monster, and I was just like wrestling with it and like fighting it. And that's alcoholism to me. It was just kicking my ass. And so when I got sober, it was just, how do I put the pieces back together? How do I gain people's trust? How do I how do I ever look myself in the mirror again? I was so disgusted with myself and full of shame. So literally in the beginning, it's you just got to put your head down and do the work. You go to AA meetings. That saved my life. You reach out and talk to somebody if you need help or if you're even thinking about drinking. You choose who you hang out with very carefully. And luckily, we have a solid group of friends and family that really love us and just want nothing but the best. I scared my dad so bad one time and this was probably a year before I got sober. I was threatening suicide, and I was so drunk I don't even remember doing it. But you know what? He showed up in Traverse City from Alaska the next day on an airplane because I scared him that bad, and I don't even remember. So like, that's hard to get past, that you put people through that.
Yeah.
But you've got to just put one foot in front of the other, and if you want it, and you just pray, pray, pray. And it's funny because when I was pregnant with my first child, and you go to the hospital and you have to pre-register and do all these forms, they're like, do you want to put a religious preference down? And I had, like, it almost got out of my mouth. I almost said AA, because like, that is my spirituality right there. I mean, that's, from what those people taught me, that's how I had found my higher power or my God or whatever it is you want to call it.
That's amazing. You mentioned shame multiple times. So how do you overcome that? I think we all deal with shame, whether you drink, you don't drink, whether you have some other skeletons in your closet. We all have that. We've done and been through things that causes that unpleasant emotion. How do you let go of the weight of shame?
I don't know how you just let go of it. What I do know is, it's so hard to explain, but when you're sober and you've been sober for a while and you've made amends to the people that you need to make amends to, you're a different person than what you were before. I just accept it, and I sometimes laugh about it. I sometimes cry about it. But the shame for me, it just dissipated. The longer I have been sober, the more it goes away. I made a lot of stupid mistakes. I did a lot of dumb things. I hurt people, and I've tried to make amends the best that I can. And that's why I can talk about it now, because that shame's not there. And I never thought there would ever be a day that I didn't have shame in my heart. And also, like, one of the things I used to always say when I drank is, I'm never going to be content. I'm never going to be content. Why can't I find contentedness? And being sober has brought me that contentedness. Like, I'm much calmer. So the shame just kind of, it takes care of itself. And I never imagined that I could like be openly talk about this to anybody because of that shame. But when you're in it, you are so full of shame and anger and hurt and sadness, and it's not a fun place to be at all.
Tell me, if somebody says, I don't have a problem, right? So sometimes we hear that, oh, if a person thinks they don't have a problem, here's the problem, right? So they have a problem with drinking. And especially, I can't relate to the, drug side of the story, but let's talk about the drinking, right? Where does casual drinking becomes an issue, right? Is it a personal sense? I I love wine. I'll tell you that I love wine. I take breaks from drinking wine on occasion at a social events just to check to make sure it's not something I cannot go without. And I think part of it is coming from, I say that I wasn't personally affected, but I have been. I know people, I've seen family members who deal with that. So for me, it's always because I have this very excited personality. I get addicted, or I get into things, whether it's a business or fitness. So I have that side to me that just gets carried away. And it's like, how do you know where it's a healthy interest or a habit that's you can manage to the point where it's you're no longer controlling it?
Well, first, good for you for checking yourself. I know a couple people that do that. And I think a lot of it has to do with how wine has become such a part of it's marketed to women heavily right now, more than I've ever seen it. There's a lot of mom and wine stuff out there. You go to Kohl's and you look at their t-shirts and there's all these wine t-shirts, and it's out there and it's hard to avoid. And I've talked to people who have said, like, I see all this stuff around me and it makes me need to check myself. And I think it's awesome that you're doing that. And I think that if you know it's a problem, if you find that you can't be without it, and then if you have blackouts from it. But to all of you who can drink wine, go on with your bad selves. I don't wish I could, but I can't. I know that. I know if I have one, one is never enough. One is never enough. I can't, I don't understand how somebody can have a glass of wine. That just doesn't compute with me. I will have to have the whole bottle and then another, and then I'll probably get in my car and go get another one, because it's just, I don't get it. But I think that, yeah, if you find that you can't be without it, then you might want to look at if it is a problem. But most of my friends drink and I have no problem with it being around them, and they can handle their alcohol. I just can't.
That's another good point I wanted to bring up. So let's say you are in a company, right, where people are drinking or alcohol is going to be present. So for me personally, if I knew that a person was joining who is not drinking, and not because they're pregnant or on clients, but because they have a drinking issue or have had a drinking issue, I feel self-conscious of just freely ordering that glass of wine out of respect for that person, because I know it takes effort.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit of that dynamic. You being in a circle that doesn't drink, and people around you knowing that it's something that you battled with in the past, and has it ever felt like they treated you differently, or tell me about that a little bit.
I think that's really thoughtful that you take that into consideration if you're around somebody like that. I think it really depends on where that person is in their journey and their stage of sobriety. If they're brand new to sobriety and they're in a situation where they just cannot avoid being around it, I think it's great if people are that courteous to do that. Me personally, I feel uncomfortable if people aren't drinking when they would normally drink.
Okay.
And I sometimes have to convince them. I'm like, please, it doesn't bother me. Have a drink. And I'm very open. Like if I start a new job, and it comes up, I don't like, hey everybody, I don't do that. But if it comes up, the topic comes up, or we get like drink tickets for a party or something, I'll be like, hey, who wants my drink tickets? I'm not going to use them. And if people ask, oh, you don't drink? It was funny because when I worked at one of my jobs, I led a team of people, and I was new to leading that team. And we had a party, and I said, hey, you guys, who wants my drink tickets? And I gave them to one girl, and they're like, why don't you want them? And I'm like, oh, I don't drink. And they're like, really? They were just shocked. Like they didn't understand that. And so we had a little quick conversation about it. And then I was walking down the hall and I could hear one of them go, how can she be that happy when she doesn't drink alcohol? She's like, she's so happy all the time. And I'm like, trust me, I'd be miserable if I did drink the alcohol. But it makes me more comfortable if people are just themselves and do what they would normally do.
Does it ever feel tempting this far into your recovery? Do you ever feel tempted, or does it?
I mean, no, not really. Like maybe in the summertime, I'll see a billboard for a cold beer or like one of those twisted tea things, even though those are, not very good alcoholic drinks. And if it's hot out, it might look good, but I don't really like sit there and ponder on it or crave it. One of the things that is the scariest thing, and I've been having a lot of them lately, are drinking dreams. I had 3 over the past week, and those are scary as hell, because you know how you don't know sometimes when you're in a dream if it's real or not. And like the last one I had, I was drinking a pint of Bacardi and I was trying to hide it, and my daughter walked in right after I'd taken a big sip, and I'm trying not to talk out to answer her. I couldn't answer her because I didn't want her to smell it. And then I'm like, and then in my dreams, I'm always like, I've been sober 15 years still, right? Oh no, this breaks my sobriety streak. Oh my God. It's like a panic. And I wake up and I have to think about it like, okay, have I drinking in 15 years? Okay, no, that was just a dream. It's scary. And my kids have never seen me drink. I got sober 2 years before my daughter was born. And a lot of sober alcoholic moms can't say that. And I am so grateful for that. And I'm not saying they can't say it. I mean, God bless them for finally getting sober. But I know that that's a regret that some of them have expressed to me. And I'm just grateful and thankful that that hasn't been my case. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow I'll drink, but today I'm not going to.
Awesome. Do you have the conversation with your children about substances and drinking and all that good stuff?
I do, I let them know that they have, it's genetic. So, on both my husband's side of the family and my side of the family, my mom's family is Native Alaskan. So that just runs in the Eskimo population, just like it does in the Native American population. My mom wasn't an alcoholic, so it kind of skipped her, but my grandma was, and my great grandma was. So I talk about the genetic history of it. And then of course my dad's an alcoholic. My brother died from alcoholism a few years ago when he was 43 years old. It was a cross between addiction and alcoholism, and it breaks my heart because he was the kindest, smartest person you could ever meet. He could just never beat that addiction. And I can tell you for certain that trauma of losing my mom, he was never the same after that. He like physically changed and he was never the same. So that trauma really went hand in hand with his alcoholism and addiction.
Wow.
So I do talk to the kids about it. It's important for them to be aware. And they also make fun of my sober AF shirt. And they're like, but some of the sober stuff that I have, they'll make fun of it, but they have an awareness. And you know what? My kids are a lot smarter than I ever was. Thank God.
I think it's important to talk about it. My parents, I remember when I was little, alcohol was always around. And I remember my parents letting me try some booze when I was like early teens. And they said, we'd rather you try it at home than somewhere else. But when it came to drugs, it was like very black and white. If you ever try drugs, you'll be instantly addicted. And the fear in me was so strong. I've never ever had anything, tried weed and
Yeah.
but that was like the extent of it. It's legal now, right? But the point is like the drugs,
everybody's doing it.
that's a different story. But the drugs were like off limits, and I was so scared of that instant life of addiction that it never even crossed my mind. But alcohol has always been a part of the culture and the family. And it's just interesting for me to think about it, how the narrative that we have in our homes, how that affects us, and how, we take on those beliefs like any other beliefs. And we can talk about money and we can talk about success and scarcity, right? So it all kind of comes from that background. But another thing I wanted to ask you about families or people that know that somebody has a drinking problem, whether it's your family member, whether it's a coworker, right? Somebody is a functioning alcoholic on your team or in your group or your office in general, whether it's somebody in the family who's not your immediate family, or especially if it is immediate family. What's the right thing to do there? I mean, how do you not enable, and how do you not get yourself into something you shouldn't be sticking your nose into?
I think for immediate family, like people that live in your household, I'm sure that if you haven't had the conversation, you should have that conversation with them and tell them you're concerned and they need to get help. And they can get help through a number of resources. It doesn't have to be AA. However, AA I found to be the most successful, like no bullshit free program that there is. But there's, rehabilitation, there's options for them. If they don't want to get help, you can't force them to get help. What helped my husband was he didn't go to Al-Anon a lot. He went a couple of times, but what helped him with Al-Anon is that he learned to just kind of shut it off. She's going to do what she's going to do, and I can't change it. So it just kind of, and I remember when he adopted that attitude, I was pissed. I'm like, dang, I can't rile him up anymore. He won't get mad about anything, but he's just like, fuck it, she's going to do it. There's nothing I can do. I need to take care of myself. So you kind of learn in Al-Anon to be there for that person, but not get so wrapped up in trying to help them, because you really can't. And if it's somebody more of a distant family member, but you're close to them, I would have a talk with them and just tell them you're really worried, or speak to their spouse if, and see what they've done to try to address the issue. And the thing about employees is, I've worked with a few employees who I've noticed have had issues. But the beautiful thing is most employers now have employee assistance programs. And that's a really easy way, not easy, it's never going to be easy to have that conversation with somebody, but if you have legitimate concerns as an employer and you've witnessed something that's impacting their work, whether they come in hungover every day, or they've been to work drunk, or something, you need, I'm as somebody who likes to lead teams, I'm also somebody who will be very, very honest with people, not getting into HR trouble, but be very, very honest with people.
Yeah.
And I will sit them down and I'll sit them down and have just a really open and honest conversation. And if it gets to that point, that's what I would do. And I would have that EAP brochure to hand them and say, I'm worried about you. We offer this. If you need help, please, and then leave it in their hands. And then you just, go from there.
Yeah. And you mentioned that there was a difference between trying to help somebody and that somebody wanting to get help.
Mhm.
It's really sad to see young generation, and you said you started early and you got on that path before you were out of your parents' house. So if it's somebody who is a young kid and they're partying and the mom is telling them and dad is telling them, but they're doing their own thing and they're deep in that addiction cycle and over consuming and just not having a care in the world, and know that they're heading on not a great path, what could help that person decide it's time to get help or they should get help? Because getting checked into rehab by mom or dad is not going to be the answer, right?
No, not necessarily. And that's really hard. And this is what, it's funny because I was just talking to a friend this morning about something she's going through with her 13-year-old daughter. And we're just like, oh, parenting is so hard. Like, you don't always know the right answer. And neither of us could come up with a magic solution. It wasn't about addiction, but it was about a very serious topic. And I guess if it were my daughter, I would have a really frank conversation with her, and I would probably get her to at least a therapist or a counselor and go with her if that was open, for us to do, just so I could understand and get more to the root of the issue. Because when it's your child and they're a minor, and like you said, you've got to cut it off and nip it in the bud before it gets worse. Because for me, it impacted 35 years of my life, because it was never checked. And I'm not saying anybody should have checked it. I mean, yeah, my parents probably should have noticed, but things are different nowadays, and we take things a little more seriously, I think. But yeah, if it were my child, I would try to intervene and I would bring in the professionals.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, your leadership definitely shines through things you talk about. So I want to wrap us up here today with, tell me a little bit what your passion has been looking like. I know you have a huge heart and you clearly have the leadership ability in you. So now that you stepped aside from your corporate job or your full-time capacity of working for somebody else, how does your day look? What is your passion? What are your goals? What are you going after?
Oh gosh, I'm going after growing a business. And the reason why I really want to go after this business, like I said, it was on my heart and it's my passion. And what this business has the potential to provide me is, and I always put it in giant letters on my my stuff over here, freedom, freedom, family freedom, money freedom, time freedom. And right now I'm still kind of, working on building that out. We've got some other stuff going on. My mother-in-law actually lives with us as well. And it's very quickly turned into in the last 4 weeks where I'm basically her full-time caretaker. So kind of that's been on the back burner for a couple of weeks. But what eventually I'd like is to really build this business up, because that's what I'm passionate about, is helping women and and seeing their confidence and them crush goals that they never thought that they could do. But I'm also really enjoying my part-time insurance role. So it's nice to still have that because I do love it, and
Mhm.
I mostly love the people, and so it's nice to have that as well. But still working on trying to crush that other business, but
Mhm.
it's going to take some time, and I understand that. But I'm patient.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Tell me a little bit. I know, and you guys, if you're not like getting the story of what we're talking about in the sense of business, Sam was a part of multi-level marketing company, which is basically your platform to spread your message, to bring women into your life. Who is that woman that you're talking to? Because we know there are millions of people doing a version of what you and I do, right?
Yeah,
And we both have the same mission: help women succeed,
yeah.
give them a sense of freedom and confidence, but we do it very different ways. So, who is your woman, and what's your what's your mission for that woman?
My woman is tired, tired moms. I mean, I've been there, done that, and I was exhausted. And once I started this program, my energy went up. I felt confident. I felt like I was able to do more and take on more, even though that hamster wheel eventually got me to take a step back.
Mhm.
It really was a blessing in my life, and it still is. And it's funny because I always say it's not even about the physical transformation. It's like that's just like icing on the cake.
Side effect. It's
It's
like,
about here and it's about here. So the personal development that comes with that and that confidence,
yeah.
that's what it's all about. I also am focused on the recovery community. So when I went to rehab, one of my biggest gripes was you don't have any type of exercise program.
Uh-huh.
And it's not like I was really big into exercise, but when you're trying to get sober, you need to like expend some energy.
Mhm.
So the recovery community, I've been networking a lot with that community and have had some success there. So um, and also just women my age. I've just turned 50 in September, and just looking at helping women my age, and so we can like combat what's coming,
Yeah.
which is menopause. And like I don't want to go down like that. I want to be healthy, I want to be fit, and I want to be energetic.
That's awesome. Well, you look beautiful. I'd never say you're 50. I was trying to do the math when you were talking about the age and the kids. I'm like, so how does work out? That's awesome. Well, I do have your Instagram handle, so I'll make sure to include it with the show notes so people can follow you and get the inspiration directly from you. Would that be okay if somebody feels like they want to talk a little bit more in private, whether it's that subject or joining your wellness community? Would you welcome the messages from people?
Absolutely. And like I said, I'm an open book. You can ask me anything, or if you're struggling with something, or with somebody in your life who's struggling. I am not an expert. Don't have a license, but I am happy to give you my my input or help in any way that I can.
That's amazing. Sam, I am so thrilled that we had this conversation, and it's been a true pleasure to talk to you. So I'll make sure we share this recording with anybody and everybody who is willing and interested and wants to know more about and get a glimpse from somebody who has been through the journey of recovery. And I truly am thankful for you sharing so openly with us.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate it.